The roasted potatoes were just beginning to crisp when I pulled them from the oven. I'd timed them to finish with the salmon. Camilla liked the skin crackling and the center warm, not dry. I plated everything with care, set out the cloth napkins, and called everyone to the table. Blake sat at the head as he always did. Camilla brought her phone with her as she always did. Iris slid into her usual seat without looking up. We ate in silence for a moment, forks clinking gently against ceramic, steam curling from the serving dishes I'd prepared. Camilla let out a long sigh, dragging it across the table like a knife. "I haven't had a decent night's sleep in weeks," she said, nudging at her fish. "Ever since your mom moved in, it's been cramped." I looked at her, then at Blake, waiting for him to smooth the tension, say something diplomatic. Instead, he didn't even look up. "Then give her your room, or leave," he said, flat and final, like he was reading off a grocery list. The words didn't land softly. They hit the table sharp and hard, and everyone heard them. Iris paused her fork midair. Camilla said nothing, just blinked once and reached for her wine. No one looked at me. No one said, "Mom, you don't have to go." I put my fork down. The food tasted like nothing anyway. I folded my napkin slowly, methodically, and stood up. "I'll clean up later," I said, though no one responded. Upstairs, I opened the closet and stared at the suitcase. I hadn't fully unpacked. I'd told myself it was temporary, that I was giving everyone time and space and help. But maybe they thought the suitcase meant I never really belonged here. Maybe they were right. I reached for the zipper and pulled. The zipper was stiff from disuse, but it slid open all the way this time. I sat on the edge of the bed and placed the suitcase beside me, careful not to twist my hip. The joint still caught if I moved too quickly, a lingering gift from the surgery. I reached for the stack of folded shirts on the shelf, still stacked as I had left them weeks ago. There was no rush, just a quiet sense of order. I rolled each piece slowly, smoothing the fabric with my hands. The small things I'd left hanging in the closet, my light cardigan, my walking shoes, followed next. I lined them carefully in the bottom of the suitcase, like I'd done hundreds of times before, always for someone else's need. Family trips, emergencies, hospital stays. Downstairs, Camilla laughed, a soft, delighted sound. I paused for a moment. I wondered if Blake had said something funny, or if she was already talking about how much nicer it would be without me there. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. I reached for my laptop and opened it on the nightstand. The browser still had the listing bookmarked. I'd saved it weeks ago, but hadn't allowed myself to look twice. A small coastal home an hour south. Weathered siding, tall windows tucked at the edge of a dune trail. The price was fair. My old colleague Terry had listed it. Trustworthy, straightforward. I clicked the Schedule a Showing button and filled out the form with my number. The cursor blinked for a second on the final box. Preferred time, I typed, tomorrow morning if possible. Then I hit send. The message disappeared, and in its place came a quiet stillness, heavier than silence. I closed the laptop, zipped the suitcase halfway, and placed it upright by the door. I didn't know if I'd leave tonight or the next day. I only knew I wouldn't stay longer than I was wanted. The suitcase looked right sitting there, like it had always been waiting for this. I reached for the printed folder from my drawer, the one with my name still on the deed. I was up before the sun, the house still quiet. I didn't bother with coffee. I dressed, grabbed my folder, and slipped out the door without anyone noticing. The roads were empty, slick with early mist. By the time I reached the bank, my hands had stopped shaking. The woman at the desk greeted me by name. I had been a client there for 22 years, long enough to remember when the teller counters still had ashtrays. I slid the folder across and asked her to confirm what I already knew. The house Blake and Camilla lived in was half mine. Not symbolically, not sentimentally, legally. I had paid 62% of the down payment. Blake couldn't qualify for the mortgage on his own back then. He begged me to co-sign. I never asked to be repaid. I just wanted him settled, secure. The woman printed the ownership summary. My name was there, bold and clear. From the bank, I drove straight to Terry's office. He was just pulling into the lot with his coffee and looked surprised to see me. "That little place near the dunes," he said, scanning his clipboard. "Still available. You want to walk it?" We drove separately. I followed him along the winding coastline until the trees fell away and the salt air filled everything. The house sat tucked behind a windbreak of scrub and grass. Gray shingles faded by time, porch slanted ever so slightly toward the sea. Inside, the rooms were small but well kept. One bedroom, a narrow kitchen, a screened-in sunroom that faced the water. I walked the perimeter slowly, feeling the give of the old boards under my steps. I opened the back door and let the wind rush through. It wasn't luxurious, but it was enough. I turned to Terry. "I'll take it," I said. "Cash." His eyebrows lifted, but he didn't ask questions. Just nodded and said he'd draw up the offer that afternoon. Back in the car, I rested my hand on the steering wheel for a moment before starting the engine. The sky was beginning to clear. I had one more thing to do before I went home. When I returned home that afternoon, the house was full of noise again. Music from the living room, Camila on a video call, the hum of a life I no longer felt part of. My folder with the bank documents stayed in my bag. I set my keys down quietly and headed for the kitchen. Camila was there, leaning against the counter with a notepad in hand. She turned the moment she saw me, all smiles that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, perfect timing," she said. "We're hosting a little dinner party Saturday, and I've made a list." She handed it to me like it was a grocery order. Wagyu steaks, imported olives, 2 bottles of red wine that cost more than my week's groceries used to, handcrafted desserts from a bakery across town. I read the list twice, then looked up. "You're paying for it," I said. Her smile faltered. "Sorry?" "You heard me. If you're hosting, you're paying." I folded the list neatly and placed it on the counter beside her. Her expression hardened, the polite mask cracking. "I just thought, since you live here—" "I've already done enough," I said, not raising my voice. "Buy what you like, but use your own money." She opened her mouth to argue, then decided against it. When she left the kitchen, her perfume lingered longer than her presence. That night, I made a small pot of soup for myself and ate alone in the breakfast nook. For the first time, I didn't set extra plates or worry about what they wanted. I washed my bowl, dried it, and went upstairs without turning off the lights. By the next morning, the tension had found its shape. Blake made small remarks about attitude over coffee. Camila clattered dishes louder than necessary. I said nothing. Words weren't worth the air. Later that day, my phone buzzed. A message from Terry. "Offer accepted, cash deal, closing in 7 days." I stared at the message for a long time, the faint smell of burnt toast drifting from downstairs, and knew the decision was no longer waiting to be made. Blake caught me in the hallway the next morning. As I came back from watering the small fern I kept by the window, he leaned against the doorframe like he was preparing for an argument. "Camila says the energy in this house has completely changed," he started, his tone sharp but rehearsed. "She's right. Things feel tense lately. We all feel it." I folded the dish towel in my hands. "Did it change before or after you told me to leave?" His eyes flickered. "That's not what I meant," he said quickly. "You're taking things too personally." "How else should I take them?" I asked. He sighed, exasperated, as if he were talking to a stubborn child. "You used to be easier to talk to. Everything feels different now. You've been distant, cold." I almost laughed. For years, I had been warm enough to burn myself trying to make everyone else comfortable. "Maybe it's because I stopped pretending," I said. He rubbed his temple. "We just need to get back to normal." "I don't think your version of normal exists anymore." Blake didn't answer. He pushed away from the doorframe and walked off, muttering something about gratitude. I let him go. Gratitude was something he'd long ago mistaken for servitude. That night, I waited until the house went quiet. I opened the folder on my desk, the one I'd kept closed for weeks, and signed the closing documents for the beach house. My name, written clearly at the bottom of the page, looked steadier than I felt. Then I picked up my phone and called my attorney, leaving a voicemail before I could second-guess it. "It's Amber Marks. I'd like to start the process of withdrawing my portion of the mortgage from the current property. Please call me tomorrow to discuss the details." I ended the call and sat for a long moment in the dark, the phone still in my hand. The silence of the house pressed against the walls like it was listening. Downstairs, a floorboard creaked, but no one came up. I left the documents neatly stacked beside my suitcase. 3 days passed without a word. I spent them sorting what little I truly needed into 3 boxes. One for the beach house, one for storage, and one to leave behind. There wasn't much. I had never allowed myself to take up much space. On the 3rd afternoon, my phone rang. Camilla's name lit the screen. I let it buzz twice before answering. Her voice was sharp, brittle. "Why is the joint account frozen?" I didn't pretend to misunderstand. Because I asked the bank to freeze it. She scoffed. You can't just do that. That account covers our utilities, groceries, everything. That account was set up for my protection, not your convenience, I said. And legally, I can suspend access until the house is settled. She went quiet for a beat. Then Blake's card declined this morning. We needed that food for Iris's lunch. I'm sure you'll figure something out, I said. There was a pause, then a shift in tone. More urgent now. Can you at least pick Iris up from school? I'm stuck in traffic and Blake's working late. I've moved, I said simply. I'm not nearby anymore. What do you mean, moved? I mean, I don't live there anymore. I'm at the coast. Silence. I bought a house. I heard her inhale sharply through her nose, like she'd just been slapped. You're joking. I'm not. I ended the call before she could say more. That evening, Blake called. I answered on the second ring. He didn't waste time. Where are you? At the coast, I said. The house I bought is quiet. He didn't respond right away. I could hear the tension in his breath, the tightening of his jaw through the phone. I waited. You froze the account, he finally said. I did. For what, to punish us? No, I said, to stop pretending things are fine. I let the silence sit for a beat longer, then hung up. I stood by the window as the sky darkened over the dunes. The porch light clicked on behind me. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt steady for the first time in months. It was just past noon when I heard the knock. 3 quick taps, polite but unsure. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Iris stood there in her school jacket, clutching the strap of her backpack. Beside her was Mrs. Delaney, my old neighbor from town. She was standing outside your old shop, Mrs. Delaney said gently. Didn't say much, just that she was looking for you. I figured I'd try here. Thank you, I said, stepping aside. Iris walked in without a word and wrapped her arms around my waist. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the weight of her small, certain hug until that moment. Mrs. Delaney gave a nod and left us. Iris sat quietly on the couch for a while, looking around at the small living room, the driftwood shelf, the open windows. Then she said, I don't like how Mom talks to you. At dinner that night, she was mean. I didn't say anything. I just sat beside her and took her hand. I missed you, she said. We walked down to the beach later, barefoot, the sand still warm from the sun. She picked up shells and asked about the birds. I showed her the patch of wild herbs I'd planted beside the porch, thyme, basil, mint, and the folding chair I'd placed by the window, with a blanket always draped nearby. This place feels nicer, she said, sitting down in it, legs swinging. It's quieter, I replied. She didn't mention Blake. I didn't ask. There was no need. Whatever she knew, whatever she didn't, her presence here was enough. She stayed for dinner, grilled chicken and corn cut off the cob. Nothing fancy. She ate everything and asked if she could come back next weekend. I said yes. After she left, I stood at the window long after her ride had pulled away, watching the road where the dust had settled. The house was quiet again, but not empty. Her voice still echoed in the rooms, soft and certain, like something worth keeping. The call from my lawyer came just after breakfast. He sounded pleased. The documents are signed, the transfer complete, the investor wired payment, and your portion of the old house is officially no longer yours. The buyer planned to gut the place, modernize it, and turn it into a short-term rental. He liked the location. Quiet street, close to schools, good bones. I thanked my lawyer, hung up, and sat with that for a moment. It was done. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. Camilla. Her voice came sharp and high. You sold your half of the house? Yes. To a stranger? To a buyer, I said. Legally, it was mine to sell. You've destabilized everything, she hissed. Blake and I are scrambling. The mortgage is under pressure, and now we might get evicted. What are we supposed to do? I didn't raise my voice. You asked me to leave. I did, but this isn't what we meant. No, I said. You told me to choose. I chose. She went quiet for a beat, then made a noise, part scoff, part disbelief, and hung up. I placed the phone back on the table and walked to the porch. The tide was coming in, steady and slow, smoothing out everything in its path. The wind pushed the dune grass gently toward the house, but the walls held. I wasn't angry. I didn't even feel satisfaction. Just space. Real open space. For the first time in a long time, I didn't owe anyone an explanation for the roof over my head. Later that day, I baked a small apple tart and left a slice out for Iris. She was coming again tomorrow. She liked the beach at low tide, when the rocks appeared and the tide pools revealed tiny worlds you couldn't see when the water was high. I washed the dish, dried it with the cloth by the sink, and returned it to the rack. The phone didn't ring again that night. The tide reached the porch steps before slipping back, quiet as breath. By the end of the week, I'd signed a short-term lease on a small storage unit off the highway. The manager, a soft-spoken woman with reading glasses perched on her head, handed me a key and said, "You'll be surprised how fast it fills up." I smiled politely, though I already knew mine wouldn't. I parked the car beside the open bay and began unloading the boxes one by one. Most had been sealed for years, items from the attic of the old house, things I'd packed the same week Blake started high school and never had reason to open again. I cut through the tape on the first box and found the baby clothes I'd kept for too long. A blue onesie, a tiny pair of socks, a rattle shaped like a bear. I held them for a moment, then folded them neatly back inside. The next box held Blake's childhood drawings, crayon suns, stick figures, and one lopsided house with a woman standing in front smiling. He'd written Mommy beneath it in crooked letters. I set it aside carefully. There was no bitterness left, only recognition of time passing, the way it always does. Another box contained the quilt my husband and I had sewn together during our first winter in Oregon. The stitches were uneven, but I remembered every one. I spread it across the concrete floor, ran my hand along the faded threads, then folded it again. When everything was stacked in place, the space looked tidy, organized, not nostalgic. I placed one final item on top of the boxes, a thick envelope, sealed and labeled with my name. Inside was my updated will. The lawyer had sent it over that morning for signature. It stated what I had long decided. Iris would inherit everything. No explanations, no apologies. I locked the door and pocketed the key. Outside, the late afternoon light stretched long across the pavement. The wind carried the scent of salt, even this far from the coast. I turned toward the car, the envelope's image still clear in my mind, and knew I had one more call to make before nightfall. The house is still, not empty, just quiet in a way that holds. Mornings begin with the scrape of my trowel in the soil, coaxing stubborn roots to make space for new ones. The herb garden has taken well to the light, and the tomato vines are stretching further than I expected. The rhythm of tending to something small but alive feels like a kind of conversation. On Wednesdays, I volunteer at the animal shelter in town. I walk the older dogs, the ones that don't get picked first. There's a brindled mutt named Rosie who leans her weight against me like she's made of need. We understand each other. Iris comes on the weekends. She brings seashells and school stories. She helps me make sandwiches and pretends the radio static is music. We walk the beach and make up names for clouds. When she's here, the house is filled with her footsteps and the occasional burst of laughter. When she leaves, I don't feel the ache I used to, just a soft echo of something good. One evening, after she's gone, I find a letter in the mail. The envelope is familiar, Blake's handwriting. Inside, a page of regrets. He says he's sorry, that things got out of hand, that Camilla's stress bled into everything, that he misses me, that Iris talks about me more than she used to, that he'd like to visit, if I'm open to it. I read it twice, then fold it neatly and place it in the drawer by the phone. I don't call, I don't write back. Instead, I boil water, steep my favorite tea, and carry the cup out to the porch. The sky is dimming, and the wind carries the scent of sea and pine. The waves stretch forward and slide back, steady, unhurried. They don't knock, they don't explain, they just come and go. I sip my tea and lean into the stillness. The house behind me is warm. The porch light flickers on. There is no sound but the sea breathing in its endless rhythm.